Oh. Ah. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people around the world. Remember, you're good-looking, because you're always looking for and finding the good. We have good in abundance. Our cup runneth over with good, beautiful good. I mean beautiful. Now, we know that good means you're a good-looking person when you're always looking for and finding the good in the world. But just look at the bountiful, beautiful, beneficent, magnificent women that I am surrounded with. We have amazing Diane Medved. We have fabulous Lori McDermott. We have wonderful Yael Trush, and there's me. And they all have much longer hair than I have. They actually, hair. Actually, I'll tell a very funny story. At least I think it's funny. And then we'll go really deep into communism and kids and Disney and all kinds of amazing stuff today. I was honored to speak at a competition. It's called the Ultimate Speakers Competition here in Las Vegas. It was on Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday was presentation, 15 different speakers, and I'll make the story very short. I actually won the competition, which was very nice. But one of the things I spoke about in the last, we spoke 3 times each person, and the last one got a standing O and such. But the fun part was that the 2 finalists, myself and the other person, I'm 73, the oldest person in the room, and her name is Shivani. She's the youngest person in the room. She was 21, is 21. I'm 73, so it's great. But she has very long black hair. She comes from the Indian subcontinent and just beautiful. So when I started speaking, I mentioned, by the way, you see, with Shivani, I used to have hair just like that. I had very long black hair because I am ultimate hippie. I mean, I was 60s. I had all that and such. And I said, people laugh. Said, I did have hair. Okay. We are going to be discussing today some very fascinating, interesting ideas relating to kids. We call them children, but they're kids. And the overarching question is the following: whose kids are they? Now, you might think, well, that's kind of an obvious duh. I'm from the mother or the father or both. They're my kids, aren't they? Well, yes and no. And that's part of what's happening in the United States of America today. There is a war in this country. It is still civil, but it's cultural, and it's getting more and more heated. And there's a chasm in the country. But in order to begin the process, I just want to illustrate with 2 very short stories that have to do with something called communism. So when people hear communism, of course, they think of Russia and China and things like that. But also the reality of communism is very prevalent in the United States as well. Again, hippie. I lived on communes for a year or more in my younger misspent youth. And it's very fascinating because the concept of being on a commune is that potential ability to share with everyone what you have. Now, only a few of us had kids, but that was also part of it. And I want to illustrate something that happened in Russia at the beginning of the Stalinist reign, right after Lenin was died and Stalin took over. So think about it in the early 1950s, late 40s, when children were literally taken from their parents' arms and put in state schools. They were no longer fed at home. They were fed breakfast and lunch, and what meager food they had for dinner always was done in communal dining rooms. And there are very large pictures of Stalin in these dining rooms. And everything that's done in communist countries is large. They don't do diminutive. They do big. So you talk about pictures that were about 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and there were several of them. And most of these kids in those days came from somewhat religious homes, Greek Orthodox, etc. So they would try to pray. And of course, the teachers would go around because they were hard-bitten, hardcore, dedicated communists. Say, no, that's who you say thank you to for your food, pointing to Stalin. In other words, he became Papa. He was the source of their nourishment. He was the source of everything. It is a communist ideal. I'm sorry to say it like this, but I have to. In Israel, in the 50s, late 40s and 50s, and the beginning of the founding of the state, it was a very communistic oriented country. And they were communes, communist communes, that took this very seriously and also made sure that children did not sleep in their parents' homes. They were raised in communal, large rooms. Jews got infected with communism. People say that we're the ultimate ones, unfortunately, for good or ill. And it's that whole system fell apart, but there were still some that were dedicated to it. So the question is not just a mute question or some sort of academic question of whose children are they. These are real issues. Obviously, we don't snatch children from parents' arms in the literal sense or the physical sense, but things are happening in the educational system of our country that are reminiscent of the things I just told you about. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a couple of questions. And these I'm happy to say, over 385 questions come in from people all over the world. Now, again, what happens is when people ask questions, oftentimes, it boils down to about 6 different questions with variations on the theme. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that I really get to the essence or the heart of what the questioners really want. And I couldn't tell if they came from men or women. Oftentimes people do write either their name or they say woman or me or she. I guess that's a pronoun. I'm being funny with that. But I'll try and tell you some of the issues we're going to discuss. We're not going to go to Disney first, but we are going to go to an interesting question that was brought up by at least 40 different people. And it was something that I had no idea about, I must tell you. I mean, I looked it up when I saw the questions, and it's the following. We're going to start, of course, with wonderful Diane, and then we'll go to Lori, and we'll go out of order, and then Yoel as the newest member of the team to talk about it. But here's the question in its essence, and it comes down to this. Is the idea of binary gender or gender being binary, is that reality or a myth? Do you hear the question? I mean, I'm telling you, honestly, I had no idea that there was even a thought process that, what do you mean a myth? But that's what's happening. I looked it up, and apparently there is a whole discussion out there of, quotation marks, educators with kids as young as kindergarten who are teaching that being binary in gender, I hope I'm saying even right, is a myth. So with that as a setup, wonderful Diane, I think you're at the toughest spot. You're the leadoff on this. So what do you want to say about gender as a binary process? Is that a myth or is that reality? Or am I crazy?
Well, Barry, I think I have the privileged spot because nobody said anything yet. And so I can't repeat anybody. But this is sort of a question off the side of the screen, because you started talking about children in Russia and children in kibbutzim and children who had a whole different, and even in our day, I read about children in Ukraine being taken from their parents and brought into Russia and being removed from the influences that would lead them to doubt that Russia is, and Putin is in charge. It's a repeat of what you mentioned about Stalin. I find that horrifying and unbelievable, and something that we really all should be praying ends very soon. When you shift into this, is gender binary, it's like, that's off the wall. And I have behind me a whole library of books that prove that, yes, gender is binary. I mean, the fact that it's only a question has arisen in the last, 5 years? And now all of a sudden you have to be woke and you have to accept that it's, somebody says, hello, my name is Diane. My pronouns are he, she, they. This is not reality. We know reality because when a child is born, we look at their genitalia and we have a gender that is associated with that. And it's true, there are people who fight different kinds of emotional and psychological issues around their gender orientation. For them, I have the greatest empathy and care, and I don't want to negate that or to belittle that problem. As a psychologist, I've come across cases where that has torn families apart. Even gayness has torn families apart. And I think these are serious issues that need to be addressed. But that wasn't your question. Your question is gender binary? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, other is not a norm, other is a disorder. And again, I don't think the people themselves or their souls are disordered. But I think if you could ask 10 years ago, anyone who's having issues with that, would they rather not have those issues? They would probably say, yes, I'd like to be comfortable in my own skin. And that's what anyone would say today. But on the other hand, you can't make up a continuum of gender. There is male, there's female, and every cell of the body is marked with that gender. Every cell of the body has the chromosomes that says what you have been given. Now, again, people fight against it. People have issues with it. I have empathy and care for those people. But to answer your question, yeah, gender's binary. And again, I could pull up a stack of books this high that can prove with all kinds of physiological research that, yes, there are two genders. And anything else that happens along hermaphroditism is a real issue. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, are there two genders? Yes, there's two genders. And anything that differentiates from that is something that needs to be treated with kindly and importantly and caringly, but not to take away from the fact that there are two genders. It's in the Bible. It's everywhere. If there are two genders.
This is very interesting. You mentioned that. And by the way, I told you, I was even amazed that the question came up and many times. Because these words, the myth of binary, is so interesting because right now in the Cook County, oh, Lori, you'll understand it, in the Cook County school system, specifically, Skokie is part of Cook County, I think, but yes. In those areas, there is an entire school system that is now overrun and dedicated to teaching, you ready for this? That binary is a myth. This is what they're teaching. It's a myth. And it's a myth of the male-dominated white Judeo-Christian thing. So, we use Bible in a positive sense. They use Bible in the negative sense. So I'm putting it out there.
What they're trying to do, if you don't mind my injecting something further, and I don't mean to step on anyone else's answers, they're trying to say that you should feel comfortable in your skin, and that if you don't feel that you go along with the stereotype, that's okay. And that in itself, I think, is not a problem. I think it's a positive. But on the other hand, I think that we as a culture have swung the pendulum to the other end that doesn't follow physiology. That's where we have to return it to the center, where we can see that, yes, there are differences between men and women, but there is also similarities. And every woman has some masculine aspects and every man has some feminine aspects, and that's perfectly fine. Does that mean that there aren't two genders? No, it means that we accept each person for the beauty that is inside him or her or they.
By the way, I enjoy wearing my boa sometimes just to feel my feminine aspect. Okay. Wonderful, Lori. When you hear this, it may be the first time you ever heard it. I don't know. Maybe you're aware of these things because you have younger kids who are not young anymore. I mean, they're already in high school and beginning college. Are you aware of this whole idea that two genders is a myth?
I just, as a woman here who's got kids growing up and friends who are in their 40s and 50s, I know of 5 mothers in the past 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, who have had a child turn from one sex to another sex. Couple have had surgeries under the age of 18. I'm not in a position to judge, but I do know it is horrific to be a parent of a child who is saying, help me, I'm in the wrong body. And I don't sit in the chair of having a child who has said that to me. But I know if I did, I would have nothing but love, understanding, and compassion for them because it is horrific. Think about all the things that can go wrong when you're a teenager. You're worried about your hair. Do I smell? What is that funky stench coming from my crotch? I mean, it is just gross. And then suddenly to have to worry about what sex you are. And where I think as a society, we're confusing people worse. I get that there's a man and a woman, right? Male or female. In fact, today, if all of you go to an airline to book a flight, they don't ask you what else you are. It's male, female. That's it. Those are your two choices. So even the airlines are not buying into this. So maybe if you're confused and you really, which is terrible to think of all the things you could worry about. Now you have to worry about your sex and your identity. That must be horrific. That's all I'm going to say about that. But to have a choice. So now I went on, I forget what I was doing. Someone was applying for something. There were 30 choices of what sexuality you had. It was binary with this, and this is this, and this is, and I looked at it and I'm like, I don't know what any of these are. And it's scaring me to look at this. But if if you're in that position, it must be horrible to not realize what you are. But it's okay if you don't know what you are. And what a great thing that our society can be open for you to discover who you are and give you time to do that. You don't have to be something. I could be a unicorn, and hopefully if I decide to do that, people will love me anyway.
Well, you do look like with your hair, with your glasses on your head. That's your horn. So that's
right? And it's purple. Can't you see?
Right.
Like, we should all be allowed to be whatever the heck we want to be and have our friends and family accept us for who we are. So in the situation, if you're going to have that, why not have a male, female, and I'm still thinking about it. Why does it have to be 30 choices you have to pick? Because maybe you're going to pick one and it might change. I will not change from being a girl. I've decided I didn't have to make that choice. But I think the more we talk about it with kids, the more they get confused because I thought I was a girl. Now I have to worry about that. I remember, oh my gosh. So this is going to be kind of weird. A friend of mine about 10 years ago got vaginal surgery. I don't know the name of it, but she got vaginal surgery. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, is something wrong with my vagina? Like, I've never seen it, but how, if there's something wrong with it, is that something I need to change? And I remember being obsessed about it for a couple of days thinking she's my really good friend. And suddenly she's doing the surgery. And my husband's like, what are you worried about? Who cares? And it was that moment of like, oh yeah, all right. It's a perception of something that someone told me. I got to worry about this. So I worry about that for our kids.
Okay, so this is the real point of these questions, by the way, that came in, I believe, is that kids are now being, again, I use the word taught, or they're being introduced to this idea of gender fluidity. That's what it's called. By the way, as one of the pronouns, we can sort of make fun of these things, and I don't mean to make fun in the denigrating sense, other than I find it fascinating. But one of the pronouns that a person could adopt is, you ready for this? Tree. It's he, she, they, them, those. Tree. Why tree? Because trees are non-binary. Wait, I'm just telling you stuff that I've discovered the past week in preparation for this, and I would find it difficult to be in school today. A 5-year-old, a 6-year-old said, like you said, Lori, that to begin to introduce these things, and we know especially as kids get to the ages, let's say somewhere between 8 and 15, peer pressure is far more powerful even than almost anything else, even parents. And to have some kids be confused and influence other kids, and this gets really deep into the psychological weeds of difficulty. By the way, I just want to make mention that under the current administration, the passport office will allow you to select male, female, or other, undetermined. You hear that? On your passport. Okay. Doesn't mean that countries will accept that, by the way, but the United States will allow that to happen. Yael, so you're on mute still. Oh, there you go. Good. As the mother of 4 younger kids, and presumably, I know this for a fact, but your children do not go to a public school. And I presume that at the parochial school that they do attend, that gender fluidity is not on the agenda. It's not part of their menu.
It's not.
But how does this strike you as a young mother of young children, that other children are being given this kind of, I don't want to call it education, but I call it indoctrination, but this kind of information or misinformation?
I think it's to echo what's been said before. I think it's horrific. I think it's really, really sad. To tell you the truth, I wasn't so exposed to this type of conversation. And when you first asked the question, it took me like a few seconds to even process, like, what? Like, how is this even a question? And just like Diane said before, to the question, is it reality or myth? No, gender is binary. Like, that's what it is. God made us male and female. And I think this is going to have tremendous ramifications on the next generation. We're going on a really fast, slippery slope of, honestly, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a mental health expert, but this is going to have tremendous impact from a mental health perspective. There is no reason why, like Diane very well said before, we are born male and female. That's the way the creator of the world created us. And within that, we both have feminine, a female has masculine and female attributes. We know that from Kabbalah. We know that spiritually we have that. But there's a strength, there's a gender, there's a biology that you're a woman and you're a man. And that is expressed not just physically, but also in your personality and so many other areas of life, right? And I think what's really interesting here is that we're saying this is a choice. Like you could choose this, but like Diane said, you could have feelings, you could have a struggle growing up or at some point in your life with identifying with that role. And that's something to be addressed. It's something to be addressed, and it's something to have a lot of love and empathy and kindness towards. But to say that from a priori we should, it's almost like, since anyway people are going to struggle with this, let's already a priori give them the option so that it's not a struggle. No. Let's realize that the creator of the world made us a certain way. And just like some people have challenges in that area of life, some other people have challenges in other areas of life. That's not going to mean that now, because I have a challenge with food when I'm a teenager or an adult, let's a priori from 5 years old tell people that really food is, relating to food, it's an option how you choose. Like, no, like maybe that's not the perfect example. It's not actually, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, why God created challenges and different challenges for every human being. And from that challenge, we're meant to find the light. So it's not to minimize that there might be a struggle for some individuals, and it's a real struggle. Okay. But that's not to say because there's going to be a struggle, let's now all accept that people should have a choice. There's no choice in the matter. We are made a certain way by the creator of the world, and we don't get to choose. we can struggle with the manifestation of that later on in life, but that's not something that everybody struggles with, and it's not meant to be the norm. It's just a deviation.
I want to something that you were mentioning here, and it also Diane and Lori mentioned, and I want to bring it out. Part of what's, I think, happening here is a phenomenon that I saw, must be now, 20 years ago, with the peanut craze. Not craze, but the peanut issue on airplanes. If you remember, for some reason, I think it was sort of all of a sudden, well, people are allergic to peanuts, very small percentage of people. Therefore, we as the airlines will not serve peanuts on planes because, you know, some people might have a problem with it, and they don't even realize and they can get sick and things like that. But it was a minute fraction of a fraction. Let's just call it 1%, just to make it easy. So that means because 1% of people have a particular issue, a challenge, in this case, a physical difficulty, then 99% of the people, well, you can't have peanuts anymore in the airplane, which I really enjoyed in the old days, right? I think we're somewhat at that stage now based on this idea of gender identity. It's a very, very small, much less than 1% of people who have the struggle, even though it's been throughout history, right? Whether you're androgynous or hermaphrodite, etc. And therefore, why should the vast majority, the 99+%, other than being empathetic with somebody, have to change their world, and especially changing the world view of what education is about? In other words, for me, education is enabling children to learn how to become kind, giving, caring adults. And by the way, we're going to do that by making sure that they understand reading, writing, and arithmetic. However, not to become kind, caring, empathetic adults because, well, this one has a he, this is a she, even though he really is a she, but she's not a he. And it sounds like an Abbott and Costello routine of who's on first. And again, not to just make fun of it, but why are we shifting an entire, like you said, Yael, I feel for a potential next generation if this continues. Now, there is, thank God, counterweight to this. We'll call them normal people. And the normal people are called mothers and fathers. And there is, so I'm going to go to the next question, actually, which is, I hope, a good segue. There's a book that I found and a movie. The movie it's a documentary. It just came out recently, 2022. Yeah, just January of this year. We're in April, right? And the book is from 2002. So let me tell you the name of the book, the name of the documentary, and then we'll go to the question. So the name of the book is, the operative title is Whose Kids Are They Anyway? That's the headline. Whose kids are they anyway? The subtitle is Religion and Morality in America's Public Schools. Interesting title. It was written in 2002 by a man named Raymond Roberts. And his argument is that, in fact, in public education, morals, values, specifically biblical, Judeo-Christian, are an essential aspect of raising children to be kind, caring, empathetic adults. In other words, you don't do it just because you think, be kind. In other words, text-based and information-based is important. But he also positions and says that in reality, there are three major partners to the educational aspect of a child becoming an adult. And they are, of course, parents, educators, and as he says, religion, some religious aspect. But all three are important. What's happening now, and I'll tell you the next piece, it's a documentary that was produced by a husband and wife team named Deborah and Jonathan Flora, Flora, in 2022. And the title of the documentary, much like the book, is Whose Children Are They? Now, this goes back to my introductory remarks about communism. Whose children are they? There is an entire movement on the left part of the political spectrum. These are hard left people, men and women. And I'm going to get to one of the questions about that in just a moment, after the next question, who posit that your children are not yours. They don't even say your children. Children are not yours. You hear this? Children are not yours, mother, father. And so the question is on the table, and again, I'm trying to put together, this was like 69 or 70 questions, all in a similar genre of, Diane, whose children are they?
I mean, I don't think it's such a big question. I don't know anybody
I
who's
didn't either, but
I don't,
it.
I don't know anyone who's planning to run out and watch that documentary. I think that parents who give birth to children have an intimate bond that is irreplaceable. And children who unfortunately may be deprived of that want to form a bond with someone that is irreplaceable. And to say whose children are they, to even raise that question. All right, the answer that comes to my philosophical mind is they're God's children. They don't belong to the parents because the parents only temporarily have them to form them and shape them into what ideally God wants them to be. And they are their own people, and they are their own individuals and ultimately responsible for their own decisions. That is the true outcome. But when you're talking about kids, little kids that you give birth to and that you raise and that you have in your family and you make into a family, whose are they? How can we ask that question? Of course, they belong to the parents? Nobody owns children. They're not slaves. But there certainly is no alternative, no room for the alternative of them belonging to the educational system, the governmental system, even a religion.
Mm-hmm.
They only belong to themselves as individuals when they're capable and as they're being shaped. They belong as part of a family that has a cohesive, caring, and philosophy ideally, but who has the most stake in their becoming fulfilled, complete, competent individuals. And little by little, as they're capable, they work into becoming their own people and exerting their own values and their own beliefs. But ideally, they've had the background enough so that it can be within a set of cohesive philosophy, thinking, you could say religion. Many people don't raise their children with religion. And that book that says that religion is the third leg, that's just not true anymore. And yet, many families that are not affiliated with a religion raise very wonderful, upstanding, caring, giving children. And I mean, I think religion's really, really important. But that doesn't mean I can tell every parent that it's important, or that I should tell every parent that schooling, education is the most important thing, or that government is the most important thing. My kids are what I have the privilege and the honor to shape little by little as they're young, and hopefully to help them develop into individuals who are competent, capable, intelligent, and caring. That's the only answer.
If I may, you're arguing for, I don't even like the term, but it's the only one I can posit at the moment, the nuclear family as the main unit for the growth process of the child, because obviously children will be going to school and they are involved in community, which again, government. So there's government, there's the school and such, but it's the family that is the trunk and the roots of the tree. Is that correct?
And that's not only correct, but you even illustrated it when you said the kibbutz system failed. Because now when people join kibbutzim in Israel, the families remain intact and the children remain with their parents. So they tried that experiment and it failed. So we know that the best place to raise children is in a loving two-parent home where the values can be consistent and they can be focused on what will ultimately become that individual.
So you are arguing for the old-fashioned, male-dominated, white supremacist.
I didn't say male-dominated because I have great sympathy and support for women who are raising children on their own.
Okay, no, I was obviously tongue-in-cheek, but the point is that it's the family. So you're arguing articulately for the family unit as the answer. Whose children are they? Is almost like by definition, how can they even be? What's the question? And yet, trust me in this, and I urge everybody to go look at this documentary, Whose Children Are They? Deborah and Jonathan Flora. It is mind expanding and eye opening of what the other side is arguing. It's truly frightening for me in our country. In other words, thank God we have open enough society to discuss things, but when you hear the arguments on the other side, you wonder, are these people really my neighbors? Wonderful Lori, what do you think of the question even of whose children are they, your precious three?
It's baffling. You know, obviously they're my kids. I bore them. Every day I send my kids off to school. And when I did, when they were younger, I never worried. They were there. It was like this unsigned document that they were going to teach my children math, reading, science, all the stuff I'm not good at. And the older they got, the harder it got for me to help them with homework. But I still trusted the school to do their job, do the math, reading, science. And then when my kids would come home and say, oh, I heard about such and such and such and such, and I would say, what? And it was against the kind of uncommon talked about rules, like don't talk about religion and don't talk about politics, not in school, because that is not the place for it. But no one ever talks about not talking about it. So the door was wide open for people to talk about it. And it really screwed up some of our values in this house. And untwining it again at the dinner table or various places this is a different way to look at it. I welcome the challenge, but I still have some solid issues that my kids have, almost like new foundations, where especially my daughter has a different foundation from a teacher she had when she was a freshman. She's a senior now, and she and I will go to battle sometimes.
In high school, we're talking.
Yep, she's in high school. She's 18 now. And I feel like I am getting my thoughts and impressions on her, but it's really difficult. And I feel like I was robbed. I feel like someone stepped in my place and fed her information that wasn't fair for them to do that. And I don't like that. So as far as what we talk about the community, when my kids go into the neighborhood downtown, there's a downtown area here, I will get calls from other mothers saying, hey, I saw your child here or there. They were doing X, Y, and Z, and I told them not to do it. Okay, I wasn't there. So the community shares my values. My friends in the community, when they see my kids misbehave, they will speak up like I would speak to my kids about discipline or various things, or in commonality when they're out talking about politics, religion, or whatever. Anything that I would teach my kids, I trust that the people that my kids will go to houses, they're going to share in the education of what I teach. So the commune of that is really cool, because in that case, yeah, they're my children, but I trust you to have dinner with my kid and talk openly because we share the same. With school, it scares me. It really scares me. And I feel sometimes that I don't have the power to challenge what's happening, or I'm being told you're just making up things. It's fake. It's not real. They're not doing that, but they are. And how do we change that? It's a dialogue I'd love to see have happened.
Okay, so the last part we're going to talk about, because as I said, there is thankfully a movement. I love the word you use, even though it pained me to hear it coming from you. You felt you were robbed. In other words, you trusted the school, meaning the teachers in the school, to have the values that are shared by the community. And we're here to educate your kids in the best possible way so they become caring, kind, considerate kids, maybe adults, and they learn reading, writing, science, etc., stimulating, interesting things. But yeah, I think we're going to slip in there some stuff that's really going to make a mess of their mind, because we're going to tell them things. You were robbed.
Yeah.
And how do we change? Well, part of the reason we're doing this webinar today is to bring out these questions and begin the discussion. And thank God we are blessed, as you know, we have a lot of people who watch and listen to us. It's pretty cool. So we're going to touch a lot of people with this. I think we lost Lori for the moment, but Yael, you're up, and it's really good. So the question again on the table is, whose children are they? Again, it sounds almost bizarre, but it's a question being asked.
The truth is, it's not. I don't think the question is bizarre. I think it's an important question, and they're God's children. I have been given the honor and the privilege to be selected to bring these children into the world and to raise them in partnership with the creator of the world. So my children know that they are a gift from heaven, that they were chosen and they were selected, that they are special souls that came here, and that as long as they're under my jurisdiction, then I do my best because God has chosen me to direct them in life. Then this is what you got. This is what it is. As long as God chose me to be your parent, then this is how the conversation and the environment is going to go, because I've been chosen and you've been chosen. So it is actually a really humbling perspective to know that it's bigger than me as a parent. They're not mine. They were entrusted to me as the guardian, and they're given to me, to my care, for a certain amount of time, just like my body and is not mine. I'm here for, I'm a soul that came into a body with a specific mission, and I'm here to fulfill that mission for the creator of the world. So I think what's missing from the conversation and both the questions that are being asked is that there is something higher than us. So when we place the question, is gender binary or is this a myth, right? Since when are we just counting on what we rational beings can come up with? No, we are limited beings. It's not because we have an idea, that's it. There's a master plan. Everybody's here for a reason. So it ties into this next question about whose children are they? Well, of course, they're my children in the sense that I give birth to it, but that's an arrogant perspective in and of itself. Like, they're not mine. They're been entrusted to me, and that's a huge responsibility and a huge honor. And I always tell my kids, like, I am so blessed that God chose me to be your mother. And when you came into this world, you brought a lot of light. We have a tradition in our household. When the Sabbath comes in, we light a candle, right? I light my Sabbath candles, and I light a candle for each of my children, because they know that when they came into the world, they came to bring light into the world. They have a moral responsibility. So it's such an empowering perspective. Like, from such a young age, they know that they are here on a mission, that they have been empowered, that there's something of importance, why they are here, why we are all here. So as long as the education system is missing that from the conversation, we are failing our children. When we don't ingrain in our children that nothing is random, that they're not here just because, just to serve themselves, that they are here because they are needed. They were hand chosen. They were hand picked. Like, if God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. That's how much God loves you. Like, you are an only child to a parent who had you in an old age. And that doesn't even explain the magnitude, right? That's how much the creator of the world loves you and needs you in his world. That's what children need to grow up with. And we as parents have a responsibility to give them that. And it's very humbling. So again, of course, we have a responsibility. But because I've been entrusted by the creator of the world, which means that I don't get to do whatever I want. It means that every day I have to think, am I doing the best I can for my children? Am I doing the best job? So it's my children are not here to serve my ego. And that's what we need to be.
I want to go unpack some of the phrases that you used, Diane, and Lori as well, because this is very enheartening for me. Thank you. I mean, I could almost say I think I would have expressed this anyway, but you see that when I mentioned about the book from Raymond Roberts, Whose Kids Are They Anyway? That's his title, Religion and Morality in America's Public Schools. It is this ability to have religion, a recognition, a recognition of the idea that we are servants ourselves. And that, I think, allows us in the religious world to be able to bring to our kids that notion, as you said, that you're a special being. You're chosen. You're here for purpose. And when people have purpose in life, then they can, what I call, go mad. They can make a difference. And part of what's missing in school is not so much teaching religion, but having at least religious values that are articulated in a particular way. They don't have to have the 10 commandments on every doorpost or every room in the school if it's not a parochial school. By the same token, I can tell you, as the person who's older than everybody here, that when I was growing up, and it's hard even to say these words now, I almost think I fantasize about it. When I was growing up, I remember specifically in the 5th grade, so somebody got to read in front of the class every morning something. So I, every week, read the 23rd Psalm. That's the one I chose. I didn't really know much of anything, but I enjoyed reading it. And so I got a chance to read a psalm. Other people chose other things. But it was the point that you couldn't say, well, today you couldn't read a psalm in a public school. So in other words, that shift, that pendulum shift has gone so far as to say that we are not even consciously going to discuss or admit that there is such a thing as God, creator, etc. But I want to go to the point that you mentioned, Yael, about we as rational beings. And I think part of our discussion thus far today in these couple questions that you see that we're irrational beings, or at least a great number of people in our country. Now, I will say, based on the research that I'm doing, that thankfully, the number of people that are involved in the other side, the myth people and such, is a vocal minority. But vocal they are. I can tell you that. They're vocal. They do have a position of power in many situations. As I mentioned about Cook County School District, it's not a small school district, right, Lori? It's a big one. It's not LA, it's not New York, Chicago, or Dallas, or Miami, but it's a big one. And the fact that there is a body of teachers that are willing to be on the front lines fighting for this, fluidity of gender and such, and saying, we are the protectors of children. You hear this? That's how they position themselves. We are the protectors of children. But how do you teach responsibility? And that's really one of I think the key underlying factor in education. For me personally, as a boy, as a guy now, what happened to me in school, in addition to the data that I learned and was able to regurgitate on tests and such like that, more about learning responsibility. That was the biggest lesson that I learned. Took me a while. I think I probably was a senior in high school before it began to sink in. But at least it was something that was always part and parcel of like you said, Lori, the community that I was in. Because if I did something, my parents knew about it. Isn't that a wonderful thing? I mean, you pointed it out beautifully. The ability to know that the values that were shared in the household didn't stop at 4 walls, that this was the way we were. And that, like you said, you were robbed when you heard your daughter was being fed certain things, because we trust. Everything is built on trust. Now, we don't have much time left, but I want to go to one of the other questions that came up very often. And I think what we'll do is we'll start on this, and maybe I'd like to do another session on this, because we didn't even touch about the D word. D is Disney. Because that in of itself is a huge shift, I think, in the schematic of what's happening in America. And it all started, by the way, it's all based on 6 words. And the 6 words are, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is what's being fought. Disney doesn't want to have those words anymore. You cannot say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You hear that? Like, we'll talk about that next time. But to me, shock and awe. Okay, let's talk about something called CRT. We all know what CRT is? Critical race theory. So I'm sure everybody's heard of it. We don't have to go into details, and we only have a few minutes, so we'll just touch a little bit on it. But Diane,
Yes.
I think you, of course, because your husband is deeply involved in politics, does know that what happened in Virginia at the election just 6 months ago or so, and it became that issue that really changed everything. It was the opening of the door for the Democrats at Pandora's box, because the then leader in the race made a statement that was recorded and then shown everywhere. It said, "Your kids are not your own." And he yelled it. In other words, we can teach your children whatever we want. You know why? Because you don't know enough. We know better than you. I'm not exaggerating, am I? So let's begin the conversation with the idea of critical race theory, which, from, again, my perspective, and I'm being open to say this, yes, excuse the pun, it's colored in the sense that I have my own opinion on this. But critical race theory does posit, if I'm not mistaken, that everything is seen through the eyes of race, and that the white, we're not white, by the way, because I've only met a few albinos in my life. We're Caucasian. That Caucasians are supremacists, and there is a built-in bias that you can never eliminate, and you must know the errors of your ways. So let's begin with you, Diane, and just start the conversation of where you see critical race theory. Does it have application in the school system?
You want a one-word answer? I mean, I feel that we all have to examine our own biases, and everyone has them. And I think that's a legitimate thing to do, but to have the assumption that people who are one race or another are superior or inferior to others based on the melanin in their skin, that went out with slavery. I mean, that is not something that should be dredged up and reiterated in the reverse. I think that we need to do what Reverend Martin Luther King hoped to accomplish, which is judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And here we are going back to color of skin as a determinant of how we judge people. First of all, judging people went out with the 60s. And the idea of anyone having a prejudice about who someone else is and who they can be or who they were or what they came from is completely, I would call it immoral. I mean, that's according to my own morals. But I have to say, we should look at individuals as the godly souls they are first. And secondly, according to what they say and do, their actions and what they put out in the world. And thirdly, according to the connections they make and their footprint on our land, as far as individual contacts. And we should try and minimize as much as possible any prejudices. And by including these assumptions that white people are uniquely guilty in our culture, first of all, it's not historically correct. The United States was in the forefront of banning slavery in the world. It continued throughout the world, including currently in Mali. There is slavery, and it was a terrible and continues to be a terrible thought, idea sexual slavery occurs, it should be eliminated in every sense. And I think the way that we can get most close to achieving our ideal is to look at individuals as first a godly soul, irrespective of their gender, their background, their just as a godly soul, and then listen to them as people. Listen to what they want to say and who they are and what they want to put out. And I would fight so hard against any school district that wanted to imply that any race was any way, because it's not about race, and it should not be about race. It should be about character.
And let's be blunt, you live not far away from a place that is, Seattle is unfortunately a battleground for CRT.
Yeah, but I don't think it's
No, I'm saying you live outside of it, but it's not far away.
No, Seattle's a mess right now.
Yeah.
But I have to say the administration has been replaced, and I think it will turn around, because again, I think the pendulum is going to swing back to sanity and back to normality. Oh, okay, this is kind of off the subject, but the fact that there's a war in Ukraine lets the world see that there is good and evil, and that there are more important things in life than trying to separate us according to gender and color, and that we have to look at good and evil as a global issue and a personal issue. The good in starting with ourselves, trying to ferret out any bad and replace with good, and working outward and standing up for good in the world. I think we're all kind of on the same page a little bit more because of the Ukraine war. We can see that evil is playing out somewhere, and we need to differentiate between good and evil.
Thank you. I agree. Wonderful, Lori.
Can you hear me okay? I had to switch computers. Okay, good. Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Barry?
Yes, we can hear you. So CRT, do you have a sense of it? Critical race theory?
I got two stories. My first story is I went to London when I was 21, and I saw a theater production, and the theater production starred a black man. The rest of the people on the stage were white. And there was another black guy who was kind of in the background, and I couldn't figure it out. All I did the whole play was obsess, like, I must have missed something. Like, how is this person in here? Like, it didn't make sense. And when I left, I was traveling by myself, and I started talking to some Londoners, and they said they were disgusted with me. And they looked at me and they said, "You are stupid. You Americans are stupid. All you do is get confused with race. You've got to stop worrying about race." And I was like, but I still don't understand. How was that guy? And he's like, "We don't see color. You guys see color." And I have been aware of that since I was 21, because I feel like we're always taught to pay attention to it. It's like, I have friends who are black. I have friends who are Chinese. My husband has been looking for a job. Well, he got one now, but for a while. And he lost out on some positions because he was the wrong color. And he was flat out told that. And he said, "But shouldn't I be judged on who I am? Like, I've been in sales for so many years." "Yes, but you've had all that education. You had all these opportunities." They didn't. So we're going to give it to them. But they might not do as well as me in this job. It doesn't matter. And that's the part that really hurts all of us. Because how can we be a better society if we don't take the people who are best at something and put them in those jobs? And if you're not the best at it, well, let's find you a way to get educated. And that pulls in another conversation. But we as human beings need to figure out how we can be the best at something and not rely on the fact that, oh, I'm black, oh, I'm this, oh, I'm that. Be who you are and be the best at what you're doing. My daughter was applying for colleges a couple years ago, and the big joke at her school was, well, if you're half Indian, you might get into that college. Just put that little circle on the thing. They all were talking about that because all of these kids know if I have a color in me, I'm going to have an advantage over everyone else. And that is sickening. We all are the same. We all are created under God's eye, and we all have the same inside of us.
What we look like outside, this is just a shell. This isn't who we are. We are what's this. And that to me is what we should be teaching in schools.
I'm waiting for some professional sports team to not take the best player possible and give it to somebody else who just needs a chance, you know. They don't work that way, do they? When it
Right?
comes to big time sports and big time money, they can pick on the little guys and just, okay. Yael, again, your kids don't go to a school that I presume doesn't teach critical race theory. Do you have a sense of it? You're on mute. Oh no, you're not on mute. All right.
Oh, sorry, I am
Okay.
muted. No, we don't. We have every color in the spectrum. And because again, we are souls in a body, and we need to work on that on ourselves and teach our children that we look for the soul and the goodness and the godliness in each individual that was put here by the creator of the world. So you know, as a Jewish person, it's just even painful to see, right? Because there's so much that's been attached to this, and Jewish people as being, you know, said that you're white and you're this and you're that. One, no, we come in every single color. Let me tell you, and it doesn't. Again, it all goes back to why are we here? We're here. We're unique individuals, each and every one of us. We're a godly soul that's put here. And once we start losing that perspective of there's something greater than us, then all of this starts happening. Then all of this, we start rationalizing everything, right? We start rationalizing how somebody from one color could be worse than another way. So let me kill 6 million Jews. They're like cockroaches, right? Like we human beings can rationalize the greatest evil. Like, just leave it to our mindset. As soon as we forget who we are accountable to, right? Who has empowered us and enlivened us with a responsibility, we can commit the greatest atrocities. We see it. Today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Yeah. Cockroaches. They're not human. The Germans love their dogs more than humans. Human, productive, amazing, incredible contributors to the world. So it's twisted. It's twisted and it's painful and it's messed up that our children, that this could even be fed to our children, to be brought up looking at differences. Well, this person stands out. Like, no, we're not different. We're actually all a piece of the master. We are a masterpiece. Each and every human being in this world is a piece of the master.
So this is absolutely wonderful, because on this high note of good and evil and such, we're going to, and I think you made a very important point here, Diane, that if there is such a thing even to say that something good is coming out of this horrible situation with Russia invading Ukraine, it is that good and evil become exposed. But you do see, as you said, Yael, when God is no longer in the picture, anything can happen. And it does. It's happened all throughout history. Mm-hmm. And the term for ego that I was taught by someone from the 12-step program was that ego stands for edging God out.
Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Because there's not enough room in the universe for you and me, God. So it's either one of us. And I think I'm taking precedence at the moment. That's what's happening in part of our school system. But as I said, on a high note, we want to go, and we'll continue discussing this next time as well. And we'll start with the D word and talk about what that was all about. And ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, let's do as we usually do, a nice group hug, going on a high note. And thank God we've been able to touch, as we say, many thousands of lives. So when this gets posted, share, because people love listening to you. I must tell you, me a little bit, but you definitely. So on the count of three, a big hug. 1, 2, 3. And our blessing to everyone is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Bye all.
Bye, Mary.